At 51, I walked away from a six-figure corporate job. Not because I hated work, but because I was tired. Tired of the meetings that meant nothing, tired of fighting to be seen in rooms that I helped put together, tired of developing people that saw me as the enemy because I was helping them become who they would eventually become. And ultimately, I was just tired of the thought that I had to keep grinding until I was 67. Hey, I'm Sabado. I'm 53. I retired about 2 years ago without millions and millions of dollars in the bank, without a huge pension, and without waiting for permission, without asking others if it was okay for me to retire. It was just my time to go. I spent a career in human resources, and I was the person that made the decisions about hiring. I helped with firing decisions. I helped with advising, coaching, and all aspects of managing people and helping to execute operational performance. And, for a long time, I thought, just like most of us, if I just followed the rules, stayed loyal, and did my job and did it well, that I'd be rewarded. And I got to tell you, I was in some ways. But what I didn't realize was that I was also losing a piece of me in the process. When I look back at my breaking point, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was subtle. Just another day, another Monday morning, I had back-to-back Zoom calls, and I had another conversation about employee engagement and a system that didn't want to change, and a culture that talked a big game but didn't want to do anything. And I remember logging off one call and just staring at my screen thinking, this can't be it. There's got to be more to life than that. And I can't continue to do this for the next 15, 20 years of my life. It was eating me up from the inside. And when I hired my financial advisor, which I'll talk about in a bit, I realized that I had enough saved. I didn't have any significant debt. And what I didn't have was peace of mind. I didn't have my peace because it was getting too wrapped up in all of the stuff that I had to deal with. And I realized that, I wasn't burnt out from work. I was burnt out from constantly having to perform. And that day I didn't retire, but that was the day I started planning my escape. So that's when I realized that it was time for me to start thinking about doing something different. And a lot of you that have watched my videos in the past know that I talk a lot about taking control of your own life and getting yourself to the place that you want to be and taking those steps. And that's exactly what happened to me. And so I'm going to be real with you here, as I always am. I'm going to be real with you here. I didn't retire with millions of dollars in the bank. And, I didn't build a business from the ground up that was going to continue to pay me when I decided to retire. And I didn't win the lottery. And I know there's going to be comments there where people think there was something significant, but there really wasn't. I did have a mortgage, which I still have. And I don't have a car payment, and I don't have credit card debt, which I think are key. Is if you can minimize your debt, then you minimize your expenses and you don't have that accruing debt. In my last video, I talk a little bit about compound interest and how in a credit card, compound interest actually works against you. So I didn't have that. And I was doing the smart things, putting about $27K a year into my 401k. And I know all of us can't do that, but my advice is always, if you can't max out your 401k, put in enough so that way you get the free money from the employer match, because most employers will match you 50 cents or dollar for dollar up to a certain percentage of your income. So at least put in the amount that's going to take you to that point where you get the employer match. And so I was doing that. I was maxing it out. But the most important thing that I did is I tracked my spending. I just looked at everything that I spent. What did I spend on subscriptions? What did I spend on Uber Eats? What did I spend on bullshit? What did I spend on everything? And really started to track and simplify my lifestyle. And then as I started to do that, I hired a financial advisor and then started to make my plan and put together that plan for the life that I wanted to live. It got to a point where I had to take control of my own life and start making decisions, because it became very clear that others weren't going to make that decision for me. And I started to look at what it is that I truly needed, not just the stuff that I want, but what is it that I needed? So I need transportation, but I don't need an Audi. I need a house, but I don't need to live in an expensive neighborhood. I need food, but I don't need to go to restaurants all the time. So I really started taking a look at what it is that I wanted, what it is that I needed. And then I started to ask myself the key question, and I advise all of you, I implore all of you to ask yourself this question: what would life look like if I had my time back? And I started to ask that question. And there's a part that nobody talks about when you start thinking about the retirement picture. When we talk about early retirement, we always think about and talk about the financial components of it, because the financial components are the easy part. I need X amount of dollars to fund my lifestyle, so on and so forth. But there's another piece of that too. There's a mindset shift that has to happen. And even if you're not retired, you have to make that mind shift, because if you don't, then you're always going to be trapped into the one more year syndrome. Well, I'll just work one more year. I'll just work one more year. I'll just work one more year. Next thing you know, you're 65, 70. And if you go and you talk to most 80-year-olds that are retired, they're going to tell you that they wish they would have retired sooner. So it really took that mindset shift. And, I had to really unlearn the idea that my worth was tied to my title. Look, I was a pretty important guy at work. I was the chief human resources officer. I had organizations that would come into towns just to talk to me, to take me to basketball games, to take me to football games, to take me to golf tournaments, to take me out to play golf, all kinds of different things that you get when you're sitting at the executive level. And it's easy for us to get tied into who we are, or tie who we are into that. And it was a shift to say, who I am, isn't about my title. I had to let go of the fear that resting meant failing. It's funny because a lot of times we look at people that are taking naps in the middle of the day, or we look at people that are taking time for themselves. And what's the first thing we say? Oh, they're lazy. Oh, they're not contributing. Oh, they're not doing the things that they need to do. But in reality, they absolutely are, because they're able to bring their best self to you. They're able to bring their best self to the world because they're rested, because they're introspective, because they took the time to understand what was going on in their mind. They become better husbands, better wives, better friends, better lovers, better whatever it is that they need to be or that they want to be in life, because they actually take the time. But if you're caught in the mindset that I was, resting was really about laziness, and you're taking too much time resting, you're lazy. So it doesn't mean that you're failing when you're resting. You got to let go of that fear. It's when you're resting, you're taking time for yourself. And then I had to get to a place where I believe deep down freedom was for people like me too. I tell you, I think about a lot of times the things that, as an African American, that we attribute to Black culture. I think about the things that historically that I've been told that I couldn't do because people like me don't do that. And I'm not talking about white folks telling me that. I'm talking about people that look like me saying, look, we don't retire. We don't do this. We don't do that. And I had to unlearn a lot in order to get myself to the point that I realized that just like everybody else, I deserve that too. People that look like me deserve that too. And just because we've had to work to get to this point doesn't mean that we don't deserve the rewards that come from it, just like everybody else. And if you look at most affluent people, the thing that affluent people, the Jeff Bezoses and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Larry Ellisons, and I could go on, they don't value the money. They value the time and the freedom that comes with that time. And so what makes them any better than me? I've always said I'm no better than anybody, but nobody's any better than me either. And so it was really a matter of trying to unlearn and start to believe that people like me, people that came from the hood, people that came from circumstances where they were told they couldn't do it, I had to unlearn a lot of that. And that's a hard thing to do, because I think as human beings, we find safety in what we know, even if we don't like it. And so it was a matter of unlearning that. And, Black professionals, regular earners, people who got a late start or made mistakes, there's a whole bunch of layers to it. So we have to get there. And if you've ever questioned whether you should get out, I'm here to tell you, you can. Again, we tell ourselves that we can't, but you can, and I'm here to help you do that. That's the whole purpose of why I get on here every week, rain or shine, and lace you up with this game. And so I started this channel, The Everyday Retiree, because I don't see enough people that look like me telling their story. I don't see enough people out there that are really talking about, hey, you can do it too. I see the Rob Burgers and I see the money guys and I see all these other individuals that are out there doing it, but I don't see people like me. I see people like me out striving and struggling. And look, I'm not saying that the struggle isn't real, but the question we have to ask ourselves is that if we're struggling, what are we struggling for? And we have to start thinking about, there has to be an end. What is the purpose? What is the meaning? Why are we doing this? Are we doing it for the sake of doing it? Because then we never get out of the loop. And my best friend and I get into these conversations. We're both music people and producing music and stuff. And so you talk about the loop, and there's people that get in the loop and they can't get out of the loop. They hate the loop, but the loop is what brings them safety. And that's where they go. And so, I want everybody. I want black professionals. I want mid-career people. I want blue-collar folks. I want everyday people, because we're all everyday people, to realize that early retirement is not just a dream. It's not just something for the tech bros and the influencers to just come out and talk about. I'm a normal dude. Like, it's the people that know me are like, yo, Saab, you're just a normal dude, but you did it. And it's like, yeah, because I put my mind to it and I focused on it, and I had the inner kind of fight. And so my job is to help you kind of keep that fight, because if you get up every day and you love what you do, then you know what? Do it. I'm not here to hate on that. But most of you, if you're like me, are like, look, I'm going to do the best at what I do, and I'm going to find things in what I do to keep me going. But if I had the opportunity to do something different, if I won the lottery, I wouldn't do this. And so if that's the case, then let's start working together to put together that plan. Because once you start to put together that plan, I think you'll be surprised at how far you can go. And, it's possible, it's practical, and it's powerful. And if you've ever sat at your desk and you thought, I can't do this any longer. And for me, it was about once a year I would get that. I can't do this anymore. If you've ever wondered, how to escape a toxic workplace, without wrecking your finances, because what I came from was a toxic workplace, and I had to get out because my mental health was suffering. Who I am now is completely different than who I was 2 years ago, and different than who I was 4 years ago before I started that job, because there was just so much negativity and so much of the loop that people wanted to change that they didn't change. And, if you've ever found yourself there, and if you want to stop surviving and start living, this is the place. So I just said, hit subscribe, join the journey. Let's build the life that you need to retire from. You want to retire from. Let's start working together and getting you to the place that you need to be. So in my next video, I'm going to break down how I knew it was time for me to walk away from my job. A lot of it is, what do you mean and how do you do it? So I'm gonna walk you through how I knew it was time for me to walk away from the job that I had, and really walk away from working altogether. And how you can start planning your exit while you're still working. Don't quit your job. Don't do that. Don't quit your job, leave, and say, what am I gonna do? Oh, Salvador told me I should do it, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, put together the plan and then work the plan. Because freedom doesn't just start when you quit. It starts the moment you decide you want more. Once you decide what you want, you start going for that. Now what you're doing is you're moving with purpose. You're moving with conviction. You have hope. People are constantly, human beings are constantly looking for hope. And once you get that hope, then the wisdom of the universe will coalesce around getting you to the place that you need to be. So I'll see you in that video. So on that note, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.